Les gens, les boxeurs comme Steve, ils sont très agressifs. Ils ont ces t-shirts un peu à la Tyson, là, les shorts du cours, un petit peu.
What I say, you must obey, just like the both of you took them out.
Et là, Maïva, ce serait mieux.
Le crochet. Magnifique shot.
Ah, c'est un vrai coup au corps.
Et ouais, le crochet au foie, il a touché.
Ah, c'est un vrai coup au corps.
Pendant Bidouan,
Ouais,
encore
pas
un
vraiment
rouge.
coup au corps.
Allez, ça va être dur là, Viviane qui a arrêté.
Oui, forcément, elle remet un genou au sol.
Et elle regarde son point. Ça va dans tous les sens, la part des deux boxeuses. Et tout ça par les bons points. Et elle touche un par les bons points. Elle a du mal, Viviane.
Et
Elle a du mal à récupérer.
Maïva va toucher.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, there is quite a bit of news coming in from around the world. Tomorrow, Kalia Karuni will be in action in Mexico. This will be her first fight of this year, and her first fight since last year. In July. She's coming off a victory over Vaida Mai Socate, and that was her only fight the whole of 2019. This opponent she's set to be fighting tomorrow isn't listed on BoxRec, and that allows us to make certain inferences that this is likely a keep busy kind of opponent in what is a keep busy kind of fight, which is necessary because it's been a whole year and some months since Greece's own Kalia Karuni was back in action, and this is in keeping with what we discussed when I interviewed Kalia a few weeks ago, that she was heading to this part of the world. This is in keeping with that bit of information that she imparted when we last spoke. And this is in keeping with what I told you guys after the WBO's 140-pound champion, also from Greece, Christina Linarditou, decided to call Kalia out, saying that a fight between them could be made and it could take place in Greece. This is in keeping with what I told you guys, that those two fighters, while it makes for an interesting situation, aren't likely to fight because they're heading in opposite directions.
They're on different paths.
So even though a fight between them might make some sense, and it does have the makings of a good domestic rivalry over there in Greece, at the end of the day, it's not something that I saw happening in the near future, and that very much seems to be the case, as Kalia Karuni is on this side of the world, more or less.
This is where she's going to be moving forward.
Currently, Kalia is in Guadalajara, Mexico.
Viva Mexico!
That is where this fight is set to take place. And I reiterate, this is an unheralded opponent, and is a keep busy kind of opponent in what is a keep busy kind of fight. But when the fighter hasn't had any action in over a year, this is a necessary evil. Best wishes to Kalia tomorrow night. Also set to be in action tomorrow, elsewhere in the world, in Moscow, Russia. Kazakhstan's own Firuza Sharapova seems to have ironed out what issues were going to prevent her next ring return. She's actually got a fight lined up. She's going to be in action tomorrow.
In Moscow?
And this girl that she's going to be fighting, Sarah Mojanovic, really is no better an opponent choice than Happy Dowdy was. Essentially, those are two consecutive pedestrian-level opponents back to back. Though in truth, I find it hard to criticize Firuza for who she's been fighting when I'm fully aware how topsy-turvy things in her career have been, that there have often been cancellations due to financial issues, things of that nature, that if she isn't fighting some of the best and brightest fighters out there, is it because she doesn't want to, or is it because she needs better handlers, she needs a better promoter or a better manager? I get the impression that Firuza would be all in the mix with the best and brightest fighters in the lightweight division, but what's stopping that is that she doesn't have the right backing. She doesn't have the right people behind her. It would be very easy for me, and very cheap, to sit here criticizing her for who she's fighting and ignoring what financial hardships she's had to deal with throughout her career.
Yeah, a lot of her opponents suck.
But a lot of these girls really ain't got no professional experience, and the ones that do have records that are upside down. I think about this, but I also have to factor in that, you know, things have been very chaotic in Firuza Sharapova's career in terms of finance or the lack thereof. That how are you going to get her in there with quality girls, quality opponents, high-quality fighters, world champions, without the right financial backing? You know, very recently, I caught wind that MTK Global had signed Mexico's own Ibeth Zamora, the WBC's flyweight champion. That is how far their reach extends. They've got anybody signed from Elem Mechaled in France to Mbeth Zamora in Mexico. They're signing fighters all over the place.
Left and right.
I talked about this the last time we graced the subject of Firuza Sharapova and MTK Global, that MTK is signing fighters all over the place. And they could do a lot worse than sign Firuza Sharapova. I happen to think that if MTK were to sign this fighter, they would open doors for her that otherwise weren't open. I've seen her in action. The girl can fight. She is a genuinely talented fighter, but her resume is riddled with these just pedestrian-level opponents in succession. And the only real way for that to change is for her ambiance to change, to be managed and handled by someone with the means and the money to make certain things happen. I happen to think that MTK Global could be that somebody, as their reach is, well, global.
It's all in the name.
The silver lining here is that Firuza Sharapova has managed to get at least 2 fights in this year during COVID times, that she's not sitting on the shelf collecting dust and ring rust. I've no doubts that she's going to make it past Sarah Marjanovic tomorrow. I'm just hoping that next year things pick up and things get a little bit more interesting, because if they don't, if something doesn't change, Firuza is going to stay on the fringe, the outskirts of the sport. We also know that unbeaten British prospects Amy Timlin and Carly Skelly are set to be locking horns on the undercard of Usyk versus Chisora this upcoming Saturday on Halloween for what is the vacant British Commonwealth title. And while both Amy and Carly are registered as bantamweight contenders, this is a super bantamweight contest. I'll tell you, I searched high and low for footage of either Amy Timlin or Carly Skelly in action, and needless to say, I didn't turn up much in terms of results. So for me, this is going to be the first time I see either of these two girls in action in what is a battle of the unbeatens for the British Commonwealth title in the Super Bantamweight division. And yet another one of Matchroom's Super Bantamweight prospects is set to be in action on this same card. Earlier today, it was announced that Ramla Ali, Super Bantamweight prospect Ramla Ali, was yet to make her professional debut, is going to be doing just that. Both her professional and Matchroom debut against unbeaten contender, Germany's own Eva Hubmeier, who sports a professional record of 1-0. She's got one more professional contest than Ramla does. Ramla's going to be making her pro debut on this undercard. And in this situation, there really are no winners. There really are no losers. As we saw, Franchon Cruz and Clarissa Shields make both their professional debuts against each other. And for what it's worth, both girls went on to do A-OK. Clarissa Shields has done very well for herself, and so has Franchon Cruz. She's the unified super middleweight champion here today. That being said, even if Ramla beats Eva, which I think she will, even if she does, a fighter that early in their professional career,
1-0,
taking a loss, it's not really the end of the world. Eva is up there in age, though, but better still,
she'll be alright.
She'll bounce back. Keep your eyes peeled for this on the undercard of Usyk versus Chisora this Saturday on Halloween. The professional and Matchroom debut of Ramla Ali. In lightweight news, Eddie Reynoso had this to say. He says, Ryan Garcia versus Teofimo Lopez can be a great fight in the future. He was quoted as saying, first of all, I want to send my regards to Teofimo. He had a great fight. It is important that new figures emerge in boxing, and yes, that fight between him and Garcia can take place in some time. Ryan is a young fighter who is learning and is disciplined. It can be a great fight, said Reynoso to ESPN Deportes. Teofimo, after having beaten Lomachenko, you have to place him within the top 5 of the pound-for-pound best in boxing. Now that subject, I myself don't qualify. Teofimo Lopez definitely is ranked in the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list, but it'll take more than one victory, just one victory, to enter into Ring IQ's top 5. It takes an accumulation, a robust body of work to be ranked amongst the top 5 pound-for-pound fighters in the sport on the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list. And Teofimo, he's not there yet. But that's not what brought us here. That's not what caught my attention. What caught my attention was Eddie Reynoso's response to the proposition that after this Luke Campbell fight, Ryan Garcia might lock horns with Teofimo Lopez. This goes back to what I told you guys before. Don't look for that fight to happen in the immediate future. I don't believe for a second that if Ryan Garcia beats Luke Campbell, they're going to throw him in there with Teofimo Lopez straight away. No, sir.
No way.
Bob Arum seems quite receptive to that idea, matching Teofimo against Ryan, more than he's receptive to the idea that Teofimo should have to fight Devin Haney on the premise of Ryan Garcia's social media following. But you know what? That social media following, those fans of his, they ain't gonna fight the fight for him. And that social media following of Ryan Garcia's, that following that he has, if anything, that makes the people at Golden Boy less likely to make that fight in the near future than more likely. They're not going to take those kinds of risks with this kid straight away. They're not going to take those kinds of risks with this kid in the near future. Even if he goes in there and completely sparks out Luke Campbell.
Not that Teofimo is staying at 135 anyway.
Doesn't look like he is, and if Ryan Garcia wins this upcoming Luke Campbell fight, he's not exactly in line for Teofimo, because Teofimo is the WBC's franchise champion, not world champion. Franchise champions, they don't have mandatories, but you know who does? The world champion does. And the WBC's world champion is Devin Haney. So if Ryan wins that fight, he will be in line for a fight against Devin Haney. I told you guys before that Teofimo Lopez is in a very different place in his career than either of these two kids, than either Devin Haney or Ryan Garcia. It actually makes more sense for those two kids to fight each other. Not that I think they will. That is, not that I think their handlers will allow that.
At least one of them.
Oh yeah. Eddie Hearn might want the winner of Campbell versus Garcia to lock horns with Devin Haney thereafter, but do the people at Golden Boy want that? If Ryan wins that fight, do you guys out there, do you guys think that Golden Boy Promotions is going to move right into a Devin Haney fight? Is that what you think is going to happen? Because I'll tell you what, I don't. And if you do, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment. You're setting yourself up to be disappointed.
No way this fight gets made that fast.
Did you forget what sport you're watching? Did you forget what sport this is? You think they're not going to want to marinate this thing to build it up?
They most certainly will.
If Ryan Garcia wins that fight against Luke Campbell, it's going to be very interesting to see what exactly Golden Boy Promotions decides to do thereafter, because I'm convinced what they won't do is throw him in there with Devin Haney, much less Teofimo Lopez.
No fucking way.
And finally, Gervonta Davis had this to say ahead of this weekend's Leo Santa Cruz pay-per-view. He says, "I cut off Gamboa fight when I tried to watch it. That wasn't me. I cut it off," Davis told BoxingScene.com. "I really didn't like that performance. That wasn't really me."
Then who was it?
"Just the overall performance. I didn't like it," said Davis, who knocked out Gamboa later in their fight than any previous opponent. "It was the little stuff that I'm not used to. That's not me. You go look at my previous fights and then go look at the Gamboa fight. That wasn't me. My performance against Gamboa, I wasn't happy with that. So I'm definitely motivated for this fight," Davis said. "The world's gonna see come October 31st. So as it turns out, even Gervonta Davis thinks that he didn't look good against Yuriorkis Gamboa. And isn't that what I've been telling you this whole time? In spite of the resistance of Gervonta Davis' supporters, didn't I tell you guys that that's not supposed to happen? A young guy, all in his prime, like Gervonta Davis, is not supposed to go out there swapping punches with this version of Gamboa for all of 12 rounds, because that's how long it took him to take him out.
That's not good.
Whenever these truths are iterated via social media, there's always a level of backlash that is received. There's always a group of guys that get upset when someone says that Gervonta Davis is supposed to be better than that. If he was struggling to make 130 pounds, which we all know he was, then he should have arrived much fresher, much stronger at 135, as he wouldn't have had to cut that extra 5 pounds. That should have added something to his freshness, to the snap in his punches, his energy reserves, his morale. But as it stands, he needed 12 rounds to take out Yuriorkis Gamboa
On one leg.
A Chinaman with 7 losses in his record took out Gamboa faster than Gervonta Davis, so believe you me when I tell you, it's not a good thing. That wasn't a good showing, that wasn't a good performance, and if I'm being honest, a good chunk of the blame for that, for Gervonta Davis going off the rails and being off track, that has a lot to do with who's handling his career, how they're grooming him, and how he's been matched. It's not conducive towards the progression of a fighter, this constant coddling.
It's not all on him.
It's on his handlers, too. What decisions they've made for him on his behalf, how they are grooming him. I saw Gervonta Davis and Leo Santa Cruz's press conference earlier today, I saw the state of Gervonta Davis and I thought to myself that the boy looks awfully gaunt. We know that he lost a title on the scales in the past. We know that for a while he struggled to make the super featherweight limit. But if that's the case, and we all know this, all of us, including his handlers, then why is he trying to make that super featherweight limit here today? To fight Leo Santa Cruz? Whose decision is that?
His?
Whether it's by way of bad habits or just simple biology, if it's not healthy for Gervonta Davis to try to make the super featherweight limit anymore, then why is he still doing that? Whose decision is this? Is it his or someone else's?
Why Leo Santa Cruz?
Why not someone else? Why not someone at 135 pounds?
A healthier weight for Davis.
If they were okay matching this kid against unheralded opponents, the kind of guys nobody gets out of bed to watch, if they were okay doing this for 2-3 years, why didn't they just do this at 135?
Why not?
I'll tell you why. Because they ain't got that many ponies in that show. That 135-pound show. That lightweight show.
That's why.
This Leo Santa Cruz fight was made with the intention of maintaining certain political boundary lines, certain borders that we're all aware of. Gervonta probably shouldn't be trying to make 130 pounds anymore. It seems like his body was trying to tell him something, but he finds himself trying to make that weight nonetheless to maintain certain political boundary lines, certain borders, to keep things in-house. And I don't think that was his decision, I don't. I vaguely recall when Gervonta Davis said that he was begging Al Heyman to let him take that Tevin Farmer fight back when, Tevin Farmer and his people were trying to get Gervonta Davis to cross over to their side of things and have a scrap.
He said he begged Al for that fight.
But the fight never happened, as we all know. And whose decision do you think it was that that fight shouldn't happen? I'd wager it's the same guy who made the decision that Gervonta Davis should keep busy with Leo Santa Cruz, that he should return to the super featherweight division after having moved up to the lightweight division. I'd wager that the same guy that made that decision made this decision, and it wasn't Gervonta Davis. I'd also wager that that decision was made not with Gervonta Davis's best interests in mind, not his per se, but the best interests of the brand, more than anything else. God forbid that Gervonta Davis should be matched against someone else's good fighters, the best and brightest fighters in a given weight class, whether they're PBC, TMT fighters or not. God forbid that should happen.
Right.
I'm telling you, if Gervonta Davis finds himself making a weight that he looks to have outgrown, that wasn't his decision. Maybe he makes the weight, but does he make it healthy? That's the question. Does he make it fighting fit? If he underperformed at 135 pounds against a fighter who was clearly past his best days, what could trying to make 130 pounds do to him? What could that do to his performance? Well, we'll get the answer to that question shortly.